Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud enough. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, I wanted to speak about how the world is not just made of a material constitution, but this materialistic outer realm translates in our inner realms as a story that human beings have from the beginning been containing reality. I thought of an interesting analogy that if we saw life as an incomprehensible picture on a wall, the framework, the frame of the picture is language. That means in wondering about the role of every concept known, it is adding to the framework. I can tell you language is the software, and the mind is the hardware. The body is the hardware, and the mind, the attributeless viewer, is the user of technology. For me, it took me a while to be even capable of perceiving myself as a technology. Usually the idea of the self, we tend to think we use technology, we have technology, but to perceive the existential position and the experiential space, it is as if nature is driving man before his ideas drive him. And when we look at human productivity, if we were to look at what human beings have produced, aside from objects, it is frameworks of the realm. Pretty much human beings have been contributing to the object-based life of their species and the subject-based life. Now, here's the cool thing. We are designed not to be machines. We are, in some sense, designed to get tired. So, if reality was just a calculation, we weren't designed for it. We weren't designed for an absolutism in what being is. Right now, it's not just language. Oh my god. Guys, I think I have to relocate. Too many bugs. Hold on, I'll be back in a few minutes, folks. Okay, so I'm back, guys. Had to relocate too many bugs outside today. I would say that stories, we take them for granted too. You know, it's not just that they are giant blindfolds. It's that back in the day, people would have to travel. You know, think as if you're living in a village and that's it. Back in the day, you're living in a village, and after years, there is some person that comes to that village, some random traveler, as if it's like a divine event. It's like a unique event for all the villagers, you know? And it would take a while to find stories, you know, to see new dimensions. That's really what stories are, I would say. It's literally been what my whole life I have with a mind pick, with like a prospector, you know. Now we can Google any story. Now information is there before we actually care for it. Okay. Let us consider that when we go to the beginning of our physical story, let us say that we have a story for our body. Let us say we have a story for our mind. Let us entertain the mind body dualism. Now, if we look at the story of the body, it was absent. The origin is absent to the being that is created. To the evolutionary being, it was as if it was unconscious at first, an unconscious world. No creature, nothing, just stuff, without a viewer, conscious viewer. From an unconscious world, there emerged an unconscious self. So to our physical story, there emerged a physical body. That means limbs, creaturehood. From creaturehood, there is the conscious self. So from an unconscious world, we evolve to an unconscious self in a world. Now this self can't tell it's in a world, so it goes and becomes the conscious self. Now the individual, the object, the creature knows it's a creature and knows there's the world and also knows there's absence. Now from the conscious self, I consider the next phase to be the conscious world, which means we are evolving no longer with an individual relationship with the planet, but through a collective relationship, experientially. So what I'm trying to say is that stories are intermediaries from unfathomable collectivity. That means it could be that intelligence is evolving through a visual individual station, but then instead of the evolution being either species or going extinct, it could be a shift from the conceivable to the inconceivable. We can say there could be a point to evolution where it can't consider itself anymore. You know what it is? It's like being conscious of the collective unconscious. It's impossible to be one consciousness at that point. That means it's like, how does the person become the unknown in a known system? The known was never known, pretty much. So I would say, if life can't be a story, because it's like a film and the story is just the frame of a snapshot picture, it's just the frame. The frame cannot be the truth of the film. Yet it is one true position of the film. I would say when it comes to the story, I feel it is easier to even judge and comprehend the story per se outside of the self. You see, what we observe, I'll give you an example. If I can use my eyes to see a tree, without a mirror though, I cannot use my eyes to see the eyes. So in a way where the first person is missing out on its own personhood, in a way. It's strange how our eyes are on our face, and how it's a first person point of view. I thought, why wouldn't the eyes be able to see them in the third person? That means really, when I thought about the evolution of the eyes, I thought, why wouldn't they be like a giraffe's neck? The higher the eyes are, the more they can see. What's that kind of fish called? There's these kinds of fish that are at the bottom of the sea, and they have like this light. I don't know how you would term it, but they have this kind of, they have this organic light. This biological what is going on is the fish in darkness puts a bait, just like how a rattlesnake has the rattle. This fish, oh my god, I don't know the name of this fish, but the whole point is the eyes could be in front of the eyes, in front of where our eyes are now. This may sound strange, but I actually thought, what if the eyes somehow were not just in like, I don't know how to say it, but even the peculiarity of why we have two eyes only, you know? You look at insects, they have a bunch of eyes, but the human being only has two eyes. A lot of animals in nature have two eyes, you know? And if we evolved from a very minuscule level, I guess it makes sense that we are adjusting to the environment, of course. Sometimes I think, did we evolve to have our hands the size of apples, or did apples evolve to fit our hands? You know? And you know what's even more peculiar? Why nature should follow nature, why nature should not be novel from the beginning, why we have an urge, why the gene has a self-replicating urge. That means on a genetical level, the gene is like copy-pasting itself. And when we speak, when we see people, even a young child seeing a teddy bear, or a grown man seeing a picture of the divine or something, something is being imbued. We are imbuing life to the moments that we are alive in. In certain dream states, once I had a dream, like at night when I was asleep, I had a dream. I could tell you in this dream there was some weird imagery that I had never seen, and there was also, like, you know how you would use your finger to flip the pages of a book? Do you know? Just imagine like a book is sideways on the table and you're just using your thumb to brush over the pages. Do you know? It felt to me in the dream, the amount of content in the dream was paging was literally like the flip, where it was as if the mind, you know what it was? It was as if the mind would start its story. Before the story would finish, it would start another story, it would start another story, and then it would have memory. So I would say sometimes the incompletion of a moment keeps it around. What that means is, imagine the person um, went through some complex task and was right there in the most important moment, and there was one thing they didn't do. Or you can say even an athlete who was so close to winning didn't win. It's as if that moment remains incomplete to the person. Because that moment remains incomplete, the urge for it continues. I noticed this in myself. In times where certain emotions would come that would make no sense. What that means is I would be walking and suddenly I would feel sad. Not constant. This wasn't like, it was just random moments, emotions would find me. You know how thoughts arise? You know? Nowadays we gotta talk about thoughts like Pokemon, you know, a wild thought appeared. And the Pokeball is like language, you know, we can I think this is the deepest question we can ask. Really, at the end of the talk, I wanted to go there, where it was like, what would a civilization without language look like? That means when we look at language, Right now, I am speaking to the audience. One way where language will become obsolete if the transmission time between my speech, that means my sound getting to your ear, if we were in a cyberspace setting in the future where all our heads were connected to some machine or cloud or whatever, computer or what, it would be a situation where there would be no need for language. We would become pure artificial emotional living. What does that mean? That means by the nature of a feeling. That means just by wanting to the other tell something to someone else, they will know. Literally, if there wasn't this gap between somebody saying something and the sound entering their ear, there would be no reason to actually move. So the more instantaneous language transmission becomes, the less there is a need to actually have a moving person, a living being. That means we live because there's known variables and unknown variables, and we're like, okay, unknown variables, let's go handle them. Let's go figure them out. Let's go see what they are. But if these unknown variables were gone, then it would be, if we were in a situation where, imagine any question you had, you could instantly in your mind access all the Google results for that question. It would reach a point where, here's the issue with information. When the system is designed to give information, people who ask questions will accept that information. What does that mean? That means if somebody says, hey man, let's say somebody wants to make a cake, okay, and then the person gets access to information probabilities and suddenly sees, like, okay, you can make an apple cake, an orange cake, a cherry cake, you know? And this person enters the system. The person had an authentic question, gets the answers. Okay, cherry cake, apple cake, orange cake. All right. So the issue becomes that because there is so many options, the person may stop the innovation. That means the person should be like, no, I don't want any of these. I want to make a watermelon cake or something. You know? So the whole point is, the issue with information and with stories is that they stop you from experiencing something new that will recreate the story. I would say the incompleteness in life arises from two sources. One, the context hasn't been looked properly. The concept is refusing to change. That means if I don't want to change who I am, then I will remain forever in the same story. We have to care about what is more real than language. And the issue is, people are taught language, indoctrinated in linguistic systems, but they don't understand what it is. Like, what is happening in the behind the scenes. I feel most people, if they were asked, who are you, like in regards to consciousness, they would be like, I'm a thought having thoughts. That's where I find really a materialistic angle on things only is left. So much of what we call reality, if there was a time machine and that brought another human being from a different point in time to what we are calling real, it may not be real to them. Let's say you time travel back to the time where the crucible was happening, and you showed people your phone. Let's say the phone, and people would see the light of your phone and they would be like, magic, oh my god, this is blasphemy or something. And that's the thing, the language suggests how far the person is, it suggests the person's level of fear. That means belief reflects fear. Fear of what? Fear that a changing world might have a different face the next day. I don't know how many people know this, but the word cosmos means order. And in Greek mythology, in Latin it means order, and in Greek mythology the origin of the realm is chaos. That means the universe began from a chaotic position where there was, again, the unconscious world, complete meaninglessness. And then order was in some sense something in this meaninglessness being able to familiarize, stabilize itself as 2 points that it can oscillate between to be an individual. That's the thing. No sense of morality can exist unless there is a dualistic perception of the moment. That means the person tries to be good. How are they being good? They got to know what bad is. And if you know what bad is, how are you good? You know? What I'm saying is not to render good and bad meaningless, but to say that they are codependent. That means even when a person looks at the dictionary, you would see emptiness is like the absence of fulfillment. Fullness is like the absence of emptiness. It's in some sense counter defined. I would say some words have counter definitions. That means the word only exists because there is another word opposite of it that exists, but the reality of the opposite is not clear. I want to read some quotes for the audience. First quote is from Muriel Rukeyser. The universe is made of stories, not of atoms. This would be true if the atom is a story. Albert Einstein says only two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. I'm not sure about the former. I would say there's no such thing as human stupidity. There is inefficient behavior, but I'm saying, like, it's that a person is as stupid as they lack the effort to update their site. Any person who can update their site, then intelligence is just based on endurance. What that means is, let's say you're a person, you enter the educational system and you do 100%, and you get 30%, 33% on, let's say, an exam or something. That would mean, and other people are doing 100%, and one person does 100%, and they get 100%. Now that would mean the person who got 33% isn't stupid. It's just that they need 300% effort to be 100%. Do you see? It's all about what you're looking at and how aware you are. This life is an opportunity. If anybody realizes this life is an opportunity, the concept of stupidity is laughable. You can laugh at it. You will laugh at it very loudly, because you will see the only stupid thing in this life is not to see what was here. Carl Sagan says, we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. Isaac Asimov says the saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. Ralph Waldo Emerson says men love to wonder, and that is the seed of science. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Science does not know its depth to imagination. Wow. Ralph Waldo Emerson scolding Isaac Newton's grandchildren, you know. Guys, science is a method. If the person doesn't understand this, it's the same thing. Just like how you can say the religious activity is a method, it's an approach to the universal sector, to what existence is, the story of existence is. You can say that the scientific method is also concerned about the story of the realm, but through material certainty. And the religious ideology has it through immaterial certainty, and that certainty exists due to the notion of the idea of revelation. But the thing is about the concept of revelation, in a changing world, every moment is a revelation. Every time, every new dimension added to the moment is something being revealed about the nature of what was there before. Marcus Aurelius says nothing has such power to broaden the mind as the ability to investigate systematically and truly all that comes under the observation in life. Martin Luther King Jr. says our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. Wow. Isaac Newton says to me, there has never been a higher source of earthly honor or distinction than that connected with advances in science. Immanuel Kant says science is organized knowledge, wisdom is organized life. Maya Angelou says our stories come from our lives and from the playwright's pen, the mind of the actor, the roles we create, the artistry of life itself, and the quest for peace. Okay. Where we are left is no longer treating language as truth. Language cannot contain truth. So what would truth be left as to be? Exploration. When the person realizes nobody on this planet knows, nobody, then the urge to explore comes. But as long as we feel the questions have been answered, and we are fighting over answers as if to 8 billion people stomping their feet on thin ice. You know, it's kind of interesting to wonder if in the future we're going to have people who are going to be story writers. You know, what if we start treating language and stories as if they're horses? And what does that mean? They have a life of their own, yet they have a utility to the user. And so a human being dresses up their mind in the language that the body moves through. You know, right now, when uh, like sometimes when I speak, my hands move, you know. And when I notice my hands moving, it's as if the body is playing with the mind, as if the mind is like, you know, the older dimension, allowing the lesser dimensions to play. You know, the realm is incredibly mysterious, and stories take away from that mystery. Stories are like as if a person's like, what's truth? And the person was like, truth is this, and put a giant box on their head. And the person, let's say the box had a eye hole, and the person was living through a box of what reality had to mean. You see, experiential, see the discrimination between the experience of existence as a subject and the existence of experience as an object. These are the two wings of the neo-philosophers of, let us say, who stand watching unborn at the moment. There was this quote from Ramana Maharshi. Let me see if I can find it. He speaks about consciousness being a screen. Ramana Maharshi says, there is no being who is not conscious, and therefore who is not the self. Not only is not Shiva the self, not only is he Shiva, but also all else of which he is aware or not aware. Yet he thinks in sheer ignorance that he sees the universe in diverse forms. But if he sees his self, he's not aware of his separateness from the universe. In fact, his individuality and other entities vanish, although they persist in all their forms. That wasn't the quote I was looking for. Hold on, guys. Hold on.
Guys, I still can't find the quote, but I found something that's could be better than what I was looking for. Ramana Maharshi says the ego self appears and disappears and is transitory, whereas the real self is permanent. Though you are the true self, you actually identify it with the ego self. Look for it, the ego vanishes, and self alone remains. The ego is described as having three bodies, the gross, subtle, and causal. But that is only for the purpose of analytic exposition. If the method of inquiry were to depend on ego's form, you may take it that any inquiry would become altogether impossible, because the forms the ego may assume are legion. Therefore, for the purpose of self-inquiry, you have to proceed on the basis that the ego has but one form, namely that of the limited feeling of, in quotations, I-ness. Although the concept of I-ness or I am is by usage known as aham riti, the I thought, it is not really a thought like other thoughts of the mind, because unlike other thoughts which have no essential interconnection, the I thought is equally and essentially related to each and every thought of the mind. The search for the source of the I thought is not merely the search for the basis of one of the forms of ego, but for the very source from which arises the I amness. So, guys, I'm going to pause here and just say a quick commentary. Ramana Maharshi is, alright, you're a character in a story, great. Now, who is the character? Dare to roar like a lion, you know, or inquire like a mystic about the nature of what is this I that you have been. That could a letter become really us? Could language live our lives for us? And the view should be, how dare they? How dare language live the life of the person? Life is beyond language, really. The inquiry into the source of the I thought touches the very existence of the ego. Therefore, the subtlety of the ego's forms is not a material consideration. Again, just a quick pause, guys. It's not the mind is not an object, pretty much. So how can it have a story or shape or mask? The inquiry into the source of the I thought touches the very existence of the ego. Therefore, the subtlety of the ego's forms is not a material consideration. From the functional point of view, the ego has one and only one characteristic. The ego serves as the knot between the self, which is pure consciousness, and the physical body, which is inert. The ego is, therefore, called the knot between consciousness and the inert body, K-N-O-T, in case pronunciation issues. In your investigation into the source of the ego, you have the essential consciousness aspect of the ego. For this reason, the inquiry must lead to the realization of the pure consciousness of the self. Thoughts arise because there is a thinker. The ego is the root thought from which all other thoughts arise. If sought, it will vanish automatically. Born of forms, rooted in forms, feeding on forms, ever changing its forms, itself formless, the ego-ghost takes to its heels on inquiry. On the rising of the ego, everything else rises. With its subsidence, all subside. The ego is therefore all. Tracking it is the way to victory over everything. Discover the real source of the ego by exploring within with keen intellect, by regulating breath, speech, and mind, as one would do to recover a thing which has fallen into a deep well. The ego falls, crestfallen, when one inquires, who am I, and enters the heart. The moment the ego self tries to know itself, it changes its character. It begins to partake less and less of the inert in which it is absorbed and more of the consciousness of the self. To ask for the omission of your name is as much egoism as to desire its inclusion. Yeah, it's the hard problem of the moment you say order is the solution, chaos is like a gum on your shoe. The moment you say chaos is the solution, order is like a gum on your shoe. So here Ramana Maharshi says to ask for the omission of your name is as much egoism as to desire its inclusion. Mainly the reason it's egoism is because it's focused on the body rather than being focused on the soul. That means those people who in life, I would say, life is, they feel they're going against the river, they are looking at how they are being the effect of this life system. But those people who are looking at its cause, they have the creative urge. That means you can say, if life was just two moments where things are endlessly created, and another dimension, another side of the coin, there was, let's say, coin multidimensionality. There was the other side of the coin, things were being endlessly destroyed. So you would see it's as if these two forces are coloring the psychology of the realm. Anyways, back to Sri Ramana Maharshi. To ask for the omission of your name is as much egoism as to desire its inclusion. In the inquiry, who am I? The I, in quotations, is the ego. The question really means, what is the source or origin of this ego? Be what you are. All that is necessary is to lose the ego. That which is always there. Even now you are that. The blank, in brackets, which occurs for some after long practice of the inquiry is seen by you. The blank, that's what Ramana Maharshi is calling it. It's a state. You are there to see the blank. What do you wait for? You have fallen into the snares of the ego. Therefore, leave off all this verbiage. Be as you are. Your duty is to be and not to be this or that. The method is summed up in the words, be still. What does stillness mean? It means giving up the notion that I am so and so. So stillness for the mind means stop considering you are this and that, pretty much. Meditation is possible only if the ego is kept up. There is the ego and the object meditated upon. The method is therefore indirect because the self is one. Seeking the ego that is its source, the ego disappears and what is left is the self. This method is the direct one. What is fear? It is only a thought. First the ego rises and sees the object as external. Anything external implies the existence of the seer within. Seeking its source will eliminate doubt and fear. Not only fear, all other thoughts centered around the ego will disappear along with it. It is the ego that is the cause of all the world. And if the ego is dissolved by inquiry, everything crumbles and reality of the self, capital S, alone remains. Find out to whom all questions occur. By conducting this inquiry, fear and anxiety will disappear. They are impermanent. Do not pay attention to them. When there is knowledge of duality, fear arises. Fear only comes when you think that there are others apart from you. If you direct your mind towards the self, fear and anxiety will go away. In your present state, when your mind is agitated, if you remove one kind of fear, another will rise up, and there will be no end of them. It is a laborious task to pluck the leaves off a tree one by one, The I, in quotations, feeling is the root of all thoughts. If you destroy the root, the leaves and branches will wither away. Instead of forming bad habits and taking medicine for them, it is better to see that such bad habits are not formed. First, find out whether there is an I, in quotations, in you or not. It is the ego, I, in quotations, ahankara, that gets these thoughts, and as a result you feel weakness. Therefore, find out how identification with the body takes place. Body consciousness is the cause of all misery. When you conduct the inquiry into the ego I, you will find out its source and you will be able to remove it. So what it means is the cosmic picture is in a story because there has been the most immediate and instant acceptance of a character. The moment we were named, it was as if we entered the linguistic simulation. And that name is the leader of how all our memories, the coagulation of all our memories behind our eyes, are following the next archetype in view. You know what it is? It's like a theatrical performance where there's this main actor, and that main actor is moving, and the rest of the actors on stage are vibing in accordance to the story being set alive, you know? So if life is a story, you can suffer. Oh my God, you know, this mind of ours has an ability to endlessly, you can endlessly reduce something and you can endlessly expand it. It's all about single pointed concentration. That means, think of it this way, if you were wanted to learn a backflip, you know, literally you can't go to someone and be like, teach me a backflip. I mean, they could show you how to do it, but eventually you have to do the backflip, right? So similarly, when it comes to realizing your true nature in a shir, as Shri Ramana Maharshi was suggesting, it's similar to that, where no one else can do the backflip for you. And what is it? It's training. So if the person, like literally that scene in that golf movie where all the people in the golf field are become invisible and the person only sees the golf hole, you know, if the person has that sort of emphasis and dedication in wondering and wanting to study their own attention, I will tell you, you will suddenly realize how tip of the iceberg the idea of enlightenment was, and how it was never about one solution to all problems. Because it is that attitude that begins actually being like a virus. If right now I think one belief system is better than all belief systems, it's done. That's the knockout. This is why I am saying we are not thoughts, we're not language, but we have been conditioned in them and we don't know our real face. And stories are our certainty, really? That means, what was life like before language existed, before words could be heard? And linguistic professors have an opinion, and they suggest that there was meaning. That means we think epigenetics is influencing us. What I mean by that is like society, culture, all of these are things outside of you, kind of like sculpting you, and you're like clay. You know? Now, the whole point is, who is going to become the ultimate sculptor of the moment? Is the free will going to administer itself, the unknown free will, or is it going to be the will outside? That means, are you going to be washed by the waves of time, or are you going to ride them? Are you going to surf the waves of time? We have reached a point where I would say caring is the only intelligence left. Because what the person doesn't care for, it dies. You know? It's kind of strange, you know? It's not like, this may sound strange, but if we see the brain as a muscle, and poetically we consider that the simulation, the neural simulation, projection of the realm, is a reflection of a muscle, that means we have to train reality. We have to keep reality in our eyes. So just, it's like wondering, whoa, 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 should life be lived like a muscle? Or should life be lived like an archetype of some, unnatural absolutism? It's strange. We have to accept the illusion because we need it to survive. We have to accept the truth so we don't die of boredom in the illusion. Ludwig Wittgenstein also says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So that means we experience the world in a deeper way than we actually can define it. And that is, you can say, another side definition to the idea of the language threshold. So that means people are feeling they are just an object, and at least in a sort of metaphysical oriented space, you can say. The person thinks they're an object and they counter, they reverse, they jump to the reverse. They suffer as an object and they're like, could I be an eternal subject? Oh my God. Do you know? But the thing is, before spirituality, before from materiality, let's say, we go towards spirituality, I would say before spirituality, people should study their relationship of language. There's something here. Language is an intermediary requirement. It's like, think of it this way, that these are different forests and you got to get through. The bottom of the mountain is material. The middle of the mountain is linguistic. The top of the mountain, as you go beyond language, becomes experiential, and experience's truth can be nothing other than its inconceivability, either by speed, either by things accelerating, as I was saying, like communication becoming so instant, there's no need for a communicator, there's no need for an embodiment. So either civilization prepares itself to be a sky of a mind, or to truly become the mind of the sky, or we end up just echoing the human behavior. That means really cosmic humility would mean the cosmos is not being owned. That means imagine we had a galactic in the future, like let's say this is 200 years in the future, and an let's say advanced, not violent but advanced. Or let's say in 200 years an extraterrestrial comes down, leader of humanity shakes hands with the leader of the alien extraterrestrial civilization or whatever, and so imagine we become allies and there's peaceful living. Then one day this alien civilization says we want to conquer the cosmos, and that's when we as human beings shouldn't be like, okay, we're there with you. Where we should be like, why? Why has any sort of mind thought that they can contain this? Do you know? That the idea of the world is that it's not an idea. The ideas are masks for something much more mysterious happening always, in all ways. When I think about how much of the evolutionary process of the creature that we are has been through silence, language is like the rarest opportunity. In a strange way, communication. And I didn't get to it, but I want to say that linguistic professors were saying there was meaning before there was language. Therefore, what that means is like there is a film being played behind the eyes of the creature before it can talk about it or write about it. And that film seems to be where the mystery is. That film is not even the absolute. I wouldn't say like it's like, here's the thing. Imagine there was a view like, okay, we're just objects, and somebody was like, no, we're not, we're subjects. Okay, suddenly the whole civilization became aware of subjects, and suddenly we were like, we're subjects, and suddenly somebody came in, no, we're not subjects. What are we? An attempt to communicate as the most possible known force with the most unknown force. That means I would say, in the blessed karma of an advanced civilization, there would be greater mysteries. Just like how Socrates says, the only true wisdom is to know you know nothing. It's like a fractalization of the question. The more you know, the bigger the mystery becomes. And now, if the person accepts, like Elon Musk has this thing where he says, um, like a way that person can run a business is like, how he was thinking about his businesses was that he wasn't thinking of success. He was thinking that this business is going to fail, but how can I reduce the percentage of failure? And we should probably think as a species that there is no meaning, but we're trying to reduce the percentage of meaninglessness. And that is the wonder of success. That means we did not ask the world to be easy. we became a new strength. You know, that's how it goes usually. And it's like a phase, you know. First there's nothing, you know. Then there is something. There is the singular. Then there is the dualistic. From nothing there was something. From something there was many things. And from many things there shall come the realization. And no, let me say, from many things to many things accelerated at the highest speed possible. Then there's an awareness of sky. So that means if you were an infinite being, what would your lesson be? Life lesson be the void. So, anyways, guys, I would like to read one more thing from Ramana Maharshi and then end off. So, thanks for whoever's listened. I will be on Discord for those interested. I am thinking of a topic in mind, but I will share it in the Discord. So, Ramana Maharshi. Those attached to objects and having endless thoughts due to the strength of latent tendencies find it difficult to control the mind. One should control the fickle mind by restraint of breath. Then it would, like a tethered animal, cease to stray. Thoughts are controlled by regulation of breath, then one abides at their source. Watching the flow of breath with the mind is restraint of it. Such watching, if constant, steadies the breath. If the mind lacks the necessary strength for constant watching of breath, then restriction of breath by Hatha yoga practices is suggested. Exhaling 1 unit of time, inhaling 1 unit of time, and retaining breath for 4 units of time purifies the channels through which breath flows. Wow, guys. So, I don't know, like exhale in 2 seconds, inhale in 2 seconds, inhale for 2 seconds, hold the breath for 8 seconds, and then exhale 2 seconds. I think it would translate to something like that. Ramana Maharshi continues, breath control comes gradually when the channels are purified. When such regulation becomes permanent, it becomes natural. The wise regard the giving up of the notion I am the body as exhaling, self-inquiry as inhaling, and abidance in the heart as natural breath subsidence. Wow, so Sri Ramana Maharshi is saying, like, imagine every time you exhaled, you were seeing how you're not the body, how there will come a moment where attention will fly beyond will lift off from this plane. The mind also gets controlled by repetition of sacred syllables. Then the syllables, the mind and breath become one. The merging of the mind and breath is meditation, and it leads to the natural state when it becomes deep and firm. By keeping daily the company of great ones, those enlightened or sages, always rooted in consciousness, one's mind gets merged in its source. The mind becomes quiescent by regulation of breath, like a bird caught in a net. This is a means of mind control. Mind and breath expressing themselves as consciousness and action are only 2 branches of the same power. Mind is the rider and the breath is the horse. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. What an incredible metaphor. Mind is the rider and the breath is the horse. Pranayama, breath control, is a check on the horse. By that check, the rider is checked. It may be done first a little. Watching the breath is one way to do it. The mind is abstracted from other activities and engaged in watching the breath that controls the breath and interns the mind. That means literally as a human being, wherever you are, whatever kind of life you've lived, if you go into nature, so not, it could be anywhere, but just like I would recommend, go to nature, sit somewhere, just sit still and silent, you know, and watch your breathing. No teaching, no, nothing to gain, nothing to get. You're just sitting there as a being, and as you watch how your inhale and exhale occurs, and you stop putting language on it, then the mind turns inward and you notice your nature. I have done this so many times. I can't tell you how many times I've done this. Where when the person is still and silent and they don't fear it, as if you had no time limit and you just sat down and you were, all right, let me see what happens if I just sit here. After, I would tell you, maybe for those who are their minds are overwhelmed a lot, you would say 20 minutes, but usually after 20 minutes, literally like a pond, the ripples settle. That's it. That's the whole thing. Because you see, the mystery of what we are is not just human greatness, yay. It is the mystery of how far sight can have meaning. In the future, there may be a day where we open our eyes in a world that we are like a god in, the cyberspace realms. It would be literally like how our imagination is, but it would be actualized. It would be literally the body experiencing. It would literally be cyberspace, would be like 8 billion human beings entering the mind. That means right now, we say we have the body is, how would I say this? Instead of mind going into body, body is going into mind. That's it. Back to Ramana Maharshi. Thought and respiration are both different aspects of the same individual life current upon which both depend. Breath control is meant for one who cannot directly control his thoughts. It serves as a brake serves a car. A floating body does not readily sink unless some means are adopted for doing so. Pranayama, breath control, makes the mind quiescent. The mind must be alive in meditation pursued unremittingly, even when at peace. It sinks into the heart. It is necessary to be aware and alert while controlling thoughts. Otherwise, it will lead to sleep. Ramana Maharshi says, attention to one's own self, which is ever shining as I, the one undivided and pure reality, is the only raft with which the individual who is deluded by thinking I am the body can cross the ocean of unending births. Okay. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the, I can tell you, passage from Ramana Maharshi. What it is that the honor of the new is missing. Sometimes when the person is trying to fit into a system, they don't have a time to actually wonder about it. And that's the whole game. There was the Zen master Dogen. He says the path of Buddha is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. And what does that mean, to forget the self? It doesn't mean to forget it, but to realize how the transitory event is not the wind passing through the branches, you know. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna open it up to Q&A here for 5 minutes. If anybody has a question, they can share. If not, I'll be in Discord after. So thanks for listening, guys. The talk is ended at this point, unless questions like Pokemon appear. Namaste.